What's up, everybody? It's Mike. We're back here on the Pitch Please podcast. And today I'm here with Sang from Peko, which was also recently acquired by Fresh Prep, but she's still operating Peko. So we'll talk a little bit about all of that. But Peko is a grocery delivery service combating food waste by getting people access to savings on peculiar produce, which I want to break that down and what that actually means. I'm sure Sang's pitch is going to be way better than mine. Because she's a veteran. But let's start with a little bit of background. Give us, your role now at Fresh Prep, what your role was at Peko, and a quick little background on you, Sang, so we can start to break into it.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for having me here, Mike. And hi, everyone. I'm Sang. I was the co-founder and CEO of Peko, and we are Western Canada's first delivery service for peculiar and surplus groceries. And everything we sell is up to 40% off grocery store prices. Nowadays, ever since we were acquired by Fresh Prep in early 2023, I've become a marketing manager in Fresh Prep. So now I split my time working for Fresh Prep in the marketing department, as well as still running Peko pretty much day in and out with a small team inside Fresh Prep. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
That's super cool. Well, let's talk about everything about Sang before Fresh Prep and Peko. Talk to us a little bit about, where you went to school, what you went to school for, and maybe
Mhm.
what stream you were in, because I find like a common thread here is people don't always start out as an entrepreneur and somehow stumble into
Yeah.
it. So I'm always curious, like, are you an entrepreneur first and foremost, or did you kind of snap and fall and trip into this over time?
That's a great question. I feel like maybe the earlier for me. I was born and raised in Vietnam, and I only moved to Vancouver in for like university essentially, so a couple years ago. But perhaps because I grew up in Vietnam and at least back home, entrepreneurship was very much the fabric of life. You like see a lot of mom and pop shops day in and out, lots of local businesses that power the economy. My parents are business owners themselves, and I think I've been inspired from a very young age to start something of my own. So actually, when I was 11 years old, I started my first ever business. I don't know if I can call it a business, but let's say it is. So I started writing these preteen newspaper and then sold them to my classmates in like grade five or something like that. My
Hustler.
teacher was very, yeah, my teacher was very unhappy with me though because I was like totally using the school printer to print my newspaper. It is what it is, but that kind of kindled the fire in me, I guess, and got me interested in being a founder. Somewhere down the line, I then went on to like start a few other businesses as I go towards like high school. Some one was like a home decor business. I sold reed diffusers that I handmade with like a couple of my friends. Then I started like an online fashion retailer. I like designed some of my pieces because back then I wanted to be a fashion designer once upon a time. And yeah, and then I guess I just kind of did as fun summer projects back in the day. Um, and then when I went to university, I kind of just stopped all of that. I went to UBC for commerce,
Okay.
and I recently graduated in late 2022. I think I always wanted to do business ever since kind of like a few of my business ventures earlier on and but when I went to uni, I guess I was more focused on, the more traditional way. So namely getting an internship and then getting a full-time job out of that. I wasn't necessarily like looking to be an entrepreneur straight out of like university. But I guess the opportunity came a bit during COVID where ever since I moved away from home, obviously I had to cook for myself, and I was never a great cook. So and just with like my schedule at school and whatnot, it just got really hectic, and I ended up wasting like a lot of food because I forgot them in the fridge or like I didn't, prep them well enough, things like that, and that got me like that give me the ick because I felt bad for wasting food and money. Um, so that actually inspired me to start my kind of first passion project where a mobile app to allow you to track the grocery items that you have in your home, and then it would like notify you when it's about to expire. So the idea is to, just remind you to use your food. That's how it got started, but then
Because of your
COVID
ick.
hit,
It
and
started with like, hey,
yeah,
you're
because of my
wasting some
egg.
stuff. You needed to like break your own ick, and that was the first.
Exactly. Exactly. I guess it started as a personal problem, and I was like, I need to be better at this." um, and yeah, so I started that passion project with a couple of my friends in school, um, and I didn't think too much of it, but then COVID hit, and then school went online. I didn't have anything better to do. My internship also went online. Um, so I figured, hey, like the time is now if you want to start a company, which you've always wanted to. Now you have a lot of free time that you can experiment with. So I reached out again to my teammates and I was like, hey, like I want to start a company with this business that or this idea that we had going on. And we spent a couple months like honing in on that, creating prototype and all of that. But at some point, like a couple months in, we just realized that it wasn't really gonna pan out as a business, at least in my view. In terms of it's a lot to deal with churn. It's hard to like uh, to build an app and like really commercialize it. Um, but I still wanted to solve that problem of food waste that I was initially, like annoyed with. So I did a bit more research and I joined this startup incubator program called Next 36. Essentially, they just bring together a bunch of young entrepreneurs, like either students or recent grads, and then put them in like a cohort, and we like go through programming and spend a summer building a company together. And through that program, I met my co-founder, like through a mutual friend in there. And so my co-founder name is Ariel. She's based in Montreal. She went to McGill for finance, and we like completely just didn't know each other before at all. So we met completely as strangers online. But we really got along after the first call, and thankfully had really complementary skill set. We both have worked for like CPG companies or food company. I was also one of the first few employees at a Y Combinator backed grocery delivery startup, and she has some venture capital experience at one of Canada's biggest CPG fund. So I thought, hey, that's like a great combo. Let's do something together. And at this point, we didn't really have like a product yet, but we spent the next couple of months like iterating and doing research together and stumbled on this specific subset of problem, which is imperfect and surplus food, um, which I'm happy to elaborate on a bit later. But it's a huge source of food waste in Canada, mostly due to cosmetic reasons or overstocking due to like supply and demand fluctuations. And yeah, that's how Peko was born after all.
Cool. Well, I'm gonna want to talk about
Mm-hmm.
that, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe I think a piece that's a bit unique. Like you knew you wanted, like you had this entrepreneurial spirit about you since like I think you said like 11 years old. So I think what I want to actually talk about a little bit, just for anyone that's younger and curious, is actually your Next 36 experience. Because I think what's
Mm-hmm.
cool about it is you had a desire to be an entrepreneur, and as you were learning, you knew you wanted to solve problems and bring something to life, but you hadn't found the perfect thing yet, and you hadn't found the perfect co-founder yet. So talk about how
Mm-hmm.
Next 36 maybe really influenced that for you and what it's
Mm-hmm.
like pairing with a like I think a lot of people maybe that aren't part of Next 36 have to take. There are matching platforms to find a co-founder, or people just go with someone they know, like maybe their wife or their partner or their like best friend or something of that nature. So a random co-founder is like always like talk to us about like how that went down and talk to us about Next 36 and like would you recommend that to
Mm-hmm.
people that are, do you have to be below a certain age? Like I don't know, what how does it work?
Yeah, for sure. I think Next 36 is not the only like startup incubator out there. There's obviously a lot of them. Like there's Techstar, Y Combinator, obviously, and then there's also League of Innovators, which are great. Each has their own, I guess, set of requirements. So for me, I really loved my Next 36 experience. I think mostly for the learning and the community. The unique thing about this program, I guess, is for a lot of startup incubators, they, especially for more mature company, they put you in a cohort and then you have certain milestone to hit, and then you just kind of come to like report on them or get mentorship and whatnot throughout. But since Next 36 in particular focuses on young entrepreneurs, so like recent grads and current students, they actually have a focus too on founder development. So throughout 8 months, we spent the first 4 months online, and just like learning from different professors at different like top schools. There's like U of T, there's Harvard, MIT, things like that. And they also bring in guest speakers who were entrepreneurs or are still entrepreneurs. So, for example, we got to hear from the CEO and founder of Ada, the uh, customer service platform, and many, many more. So I think that's the learning piece. And then a lot of the curriculum kind of condition you to think big, I guess, and think globally. So a lot of that growth mindset, and obviously like the fundamentals of, for example, things like finance, like modeling, market research, kind of like a business crash course, so to speak. And then the latter 4 months, which is in the summer, the idea is you bring all of these 36 people together into a dorm in the University of Toronto, live together there in the dorm for 4 months. So it's like a hacker house of sort. And then you go to like programming together, you go to events together, you build your company, obviously, and then there's like certain milestone or certain investment tranche that you can present at to get funding. So to join X36, you can get up to $50,000 in funding through a SAVE. And that's a great way to get some seed money as well if you are looking for external investment. Unfortunately, my year was COVID, so I didn't get to do the living experience. So we just did everything online. But I still managed to meet a lot of my friends later on, and then we're still like very close friends up until now. And I think the most important piece was the community, because it's so lonely sometimes to be a founder, and especially being a young founder. I think you're probably more inexperienced than not, and I think you're every founder kind of have to be a little delusional and to some extent to think that they can do something that that is like groundbreaking, for example, when they might not have like a lot of years of experience yet. So I think that aspect was really key, because you're kind of learning by doing. um, and it's helpful to kind of have peers around you that are going through the same thing. You can like share your experience and just learn from each other. So I think that's the biggest piece. Next 36 does take equity for joining the program, as with many other incubators. Some do not. So League of Innovator, for example, doesn't. So yeah, I encourage you to do your own research and choose what fits your startup and yourself best.
That's cool. I like the journey you brought it down. It's also kind of like Big Brothers or like Startup Survivor at some level there, where you all come together. But you touched on some really
Yeah.
important points, which is like the learning element, the community element, the mindset element, like the hacking at the same time, and like the
Hmm.
resources and support, which is pretty cool. So talk to me about like this
Hmm.
this founder match. Um,
Yeah. Oh,
because
oh my goodness.
so your founder from Next 36, your co-founder, is the same because you
No.
emerged from Next 36 with Peko, or different
Yes.
co-founders?
No, it's the same co-founder. I only had one ever, but
Okay.
so she actually was never part of Next 36. So how it works is you can like apply to join, and there's like 2 rounds. So I applied in the first round, I got in, whatever. And then the second round was supposed to be for co-founder only.
Okay.
And then at that point, I hadn't had a co-founder yet, and my
So you
friend
just went
in
on
the
like the
Next
Tinder
36.
of co-founder and started swiping?
Kind a little bit. Didn't have to swipe too much, thankfully, and I think I was really lucky in this department. I don't know if this is like the traditional experience. I know it's like a lot more rocky usually, but my friend in Next 36 essentially introduced me to my current co-founder Ariel. because they work together. And then Ariel was interested in applying in Next 36 as a co-founder. Um, and yeah, like so he connected us, and then we talked like over like Google Meet or something. And then I was just sharing what I was looking for a co-founder and interviewing her of some sort at the same time, and she did the same. And then we just really got along. And then I think I only talked to maybe like two or three more people. And then I just had that, obviously there are things that line up with like our backgrounds and whatnot, but then there's like a gut feeling too that she seems like a good match, even though we don't know each other too well. And thankfully didn't yeah, we managed to not kill each other over 2 years, and even became roommates at the end of the course.
That's cool. Well, I
But
mean, that
yeah,
was like that was your first attempt at like the Tinder of co-founding. Like I assume
yeah.
that maybe if you had to do it again, this sounds like it worked out well,
Mm,
but what were
mm-hmm,
some of the questions that you were
mm,
asking? And if you had to
mm,
go on like the speed dating of co-founders again, now that you've been through it and been successfully
mm-hmm.
acquired, I think you said your co-founder is Ariel.
Yes.
Ariel, don't listen to this part because like maybe there's some things that just like got brushed under the rug for the first go around. But saying like what would be your questions? Like what would you be looking for? And what are some things
Mm,
that maybe you didn't ask that you and Ariel had to like shake out later that you would just bring up way sooner?
mm. Oh, that's a great question. I think maybe like one mistake that we make earlier on is like we should have signed like some legal agreement like earlier on. We like definitely delayed that part until later based on the foundation of trust, which worked out fine, but um it's not a good practice. You should probably get your legal documents in order first, like shareholder
Okay, that's good
agreement, things like
advice.
that. Yeah, crucial actually. Like that's what like the first thing they teach you in like incubators program, but I clearly didn't do it until later. Thankfully in my case it worked out okay. I think the most important thing now that I've gone through it the first round and was successful with it, I guess, is to really assess like their why, what is driving them as a to become a founder. And I guess this might not come as a straight answer, or I guess you can ask them right up straight, but I think it's evaluated through a lot of their interests, like their past experience, and also just how they think about like scoping out the problem and coming up with a solution. I obviously like every business is admirable, but I really like especially admire people who want to start or innovate because they want to solve some sort of like social problem or a problem that can bring a net positive impact to society. So that's who I tend to gravitate towards. I think that makes me a better person. I think it pushed me to work hard, and I think that also is kind of a proxy of how deeply you care about like humanity and things like that, which is important to me personally. I think obviously like you have to assess for certain skill set, which I think that's the more straightforward part. Um, and um, really, it's just like, are they a decent human being? Because you probably hear of so many co-founder breakup stories too. It's actually one of the biggest reasons why companies fall apart is co-founder breakup. Um, also due to a variety of reasons, like life circumstances can change. But I think at the end of the day, if you don't want someone to screw over you, then you kind of have to assess if they are a good person initially, which I know is hard to assess for. And I think a lot of it is like kind of like a gut feeling too. And also um, just how, yeah, like seeing how they treat other people, their friends, their family, strangers, things like that. Which might not be conventional advice, honestly, but I think that's really like the takeaway from me after going through this process.
It's a good proxy. Checking on the people
It's a
like nearest
proxy.
and dearest to them to see like,
Yeah.
are you going to be like one of those people that's either been burned or is extremely happy to have that person's friendship or whatnot.
hmm
Um,
Yeah.
Good advice. I think there's a lot of really
Mhm,
good nuggets in some of the stuff we've already talked about. So now let's see what that
mhm,
brought to life. We're going to talk about
mhm,
Peko. Saying you're on
mhm.
a show called Pitch Please. So before we do anything, take that gulp of water. Let's hear your best pitch, please.
All right, I am ready. Hey, I'm Sang, co-founder of Peko, and I want to help you save money by saving food. Canada creates almost $50 billion worth of avoidable food waste every year, 30% of which is due to overstocking and cosmetic reasons alone. Meanwhile, we're seeing the highest increase in food costs since 2010, amounting close to $1,000 per family of four per year. Food waste, when not properly composted, also creates greenhouse gases, which greatly contribute to the climate crisis. And that's why PECO's mission is to fight food waste and empower access to affordable and healthy diets. So at Peko, what we do is we source these cosmetically imperfect or surplus grocery items that would have otherwise be thrown out, pack them into a mystery bag, and deliver them to consumer. Everything we sell is up to 40% cheaper than grocery store prices. And currently, we service Metro Vancouver and Calgary, and we're planning to expand across Canada in the next couple of years. In just over 2 years, we have saved over 300,000 pounds of food from going to waste and created close to $1 million in grocery savings for our consumer. And our goal is to build the number one online marketplace for sustainable yet affordable for all Canadians.
That's super cool. And I love that you've weaved in like the impact, some of the areas that you're
Mm-hmm.
covering, super tight. And I want to talk about like this imperfect and all of those. But before we do, I think it's important to talk about that context that you set before, which is food and food waste and where and how these things in the supply chain turn up. So maybe you can like help us understand the magnitude of some of this. You talked about some stats in your pitch, but talk to us
Mm-hmm.
about just general food distribution, and then a little bit about like what brought you to where Peko fits into this, and then we can go from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a packed question. I'll address it like one by one, I guess. So I guess first we should understand at an industry level, the food industry level. So the food industry, particularly fresh produce, is quite archaic. So there's a lot of legacy system. There's still a lot of manual labor required. And fresh produce, which is what we started out with. So our mystery bags that we're selling currently is mystery bags of fruit and veggies. Um, Produce is usually graded by wholesaler visually. So they would pick out a sample size on any given day. And then based on things like sizing, color, blemishes, they would grade them A, B, C, things like that. So grade A would be the perfect one, like no issue whatsoever. Goes into the big supermarket chains, the Whole Foods of the world, and then B grade is what we work with. So that's the fruit and veggies that have some bruising, maybe like discoloration, or they might just be like surplus that are grade A. So like they don't really have anything wrong with them. They're just surplus. And why is there a surplus? There is, I guess, no perfect formula to really match supply and demand. And no matter how well you like forecast your demand as a buyer. So for example, supermarket chains or like food production company, you will never, and since you have to buy in bulk to, like offset some of the costs, it will never completely balance out with the supply that is provided by like farmers or wholesalers. So that's why there's this kind of surplus food. They just don't sell enough, or maybe food might have ripened during transportation. So I have a funny story to tell here. When we first started Peko that summer of 2021, one of our supplier called us up and was like, hey, we have 16,000 pounds of bananas that that yellowed over transportation, and the grocery store that was supposed to buy them like don't want them anymore because they want green bananas so that they can ripen in store, right? Do you want to take them? At that point, I was like, wow, that's great for us, I guess, but I can't take 16,000 pounds of bananas. So we took some of them, but that's just an example as to why this surplus happened, even though nothing is really wrong with it. Um, and there are really five stages of food waste when you really break it down. So there's like the production level, which is at the farm, and then there's post harvest, handling, and storage, and then there's processing and manufacturing, which is when it's passed down to like manufacturer, like food company. So, for example, my parent company, Fresh Prep, would fit into this category as they buy the food from the wholesaler, right? And then they maybe like they process it, they chop it to make it into a meal kit. And then there's distribution and retail, which is the supermarkets or like the leading to the consumer level. And then lastly, there's consumption, which is at the consumer level. So as mentioned, Peko currently work mostly with post-harvest, manufacturing, and distribution. So we work mostly with the step between wholesaler and food manufacturer. And now that I've been in the weeds of this industry for a couple of years, I can safely say that the majority of food waste post farm actually comes more from surplus food than cosmetically imperfect food. And when I say cosmetically imperfect, I meant things that look really funky. Maybe I'm just making this up, like a tomato that looks like a heart, for example, or like look really like funky somehow, which is usually the poster child of imperfect food. If you do Google the term, it will show you like some really funky vegetable.
What's crazy is I
But
didn't realize like my
yeah,
vegetables were like a fashion show. Like, ooh, you sexy tomato, you unsexy, you go into the B grade. Like I didn't realize it's
I
crazy. So
know.
that upstream
Hmm.
bouginess on what our food looks like actually has this impact on our supply chain and food waste.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's just what the information that we're exposed to as consumer and kind of when we see like movies and grocery store, like display and whatnot, it looks so perfect and shiny and all of that, which is not, like usually the case for food. They do have some like natural imperfections to them, just like humans, right? Like we're just, naturally born with
Yeah, I'm
something
like
that's,
definitely like C grade,
unique.
wherever those ones
No,
go.
no, you're not secret at all. But yeah, so yeah, this the majority of food waste comes from surplus food because of supply and demand mismatch, like food perishing in transportation, things like that. Um, and based on our survey with like the farms and wholesalers when we first started, while the exact split between, imperfect and I guess non-imperfect food does fluctuate, they usually see around 10 to 20% of imperfect food at the farm level. And a lot of that actually doesn't get harvested at all because they can't sell them. Or if they have to sell them, it's at a ridiculously low cost because they would need to be upcycled into, like, for example, jam. Or a lot of times, because the labor cost is not worth it for the farmers, they just let the food compost like on the farm. So a lot of the like cosmetically imperfect food actually gets stuck at the farm level. So when as you move across the supply chain to wholesaler, manufacturer, distributors, things like that, they actually become more of a like surplus and blemishes problem. And while both are important, we at Peko decided to um, focusing on the distribution and manufacturing piece because that's the more, I guess, accessible way to enter the industry. You need to move a lot of volume to kind of move things out of the farm, and then we also think it can make a bigger impact, at least initially, to help consumers save money, and then also helping producer reduce shrink and make some like reduce their costs by wasting food essentially.
I'm fascinated. I don't know where to go. There's so many questions. Let Okay. Can you help me understand how this works? Like, did you just have
Hmm.
like a massive sorting facility and you would receive your 16,000 pounds of like not so sexy bananas and then distribute them
Hmm.
from there? Like, talk me through how this works
Hmm. Yeah.
um, operationally. And then I want to learn how you learned about this industry, but let's just talk about how the heck this thing
Yeah.
works.
Oh, was definitely not that fancy. We definitely never had a major facility or anything. So when we first got started, I think it took like maybe roughly a month from when we landed on the idea to when we launched our service. I remember distinctly it was May 2021. We spent the whole month going to every single farmer's market in Vancouver that you can ever think of. We talked to every single farm that was there. We knocked on every door at the wholesaler and asking, kind of surveying and asking about the problem of imperfect food and surplus food. So initially, I did think that the imperfect food was such a big issue. Um, and as I get, the responses from these producer, I realized that, oh, it's like a mix of imperfection and also surplus. And we partner with a couple of local farms to start off, as in we literally just ask them like, hey, do you want to sell your like imperfect food or surplus food to us at like a discount, and then we can then transfer the discount to the consumer. That's why we're cheaper than grocery store prices. um and yeah, like it was not too hard to get them because I guess they have nothing to lose to sell to us. And we had also done a couple of consumer survey and interviews and really validated that consumer have a need to eat healthy without breaking the bank. So when we put two and two together, we thought that we can create a solution that help both of the parties. So help producer, reduce their shrink, recoup some costs while having consumer saving food. And how we first started off is we just buy these like bulk of produce from these producer. We like pack them into a mystery box ourselves. We came up with sort of a formula to do it. So, for example, we would always have some kind of carbs like potatoes, yam, some kind of leafy green, some kind of fruit, things like that. And they always remain a certain weight and a certain variety of item. And we ship out, the first couple hundred of boxes by ourselves because we were just a team of two. But funny enough, both me and Ariel back then didn't have a driver license, and we ran a grocery
You
delivery
actually had to
company.
like Uber these things around and like pay for shipping and
No,
stuff.
not that fancy, not that fancy. That would like break our bank. Um, so we asked a lot of our friends and partner to help drive us around, which many things to them over the course of that summer. Um, until eventually we found a like a white label delivery service that can take it on. um, when we first started out, it was very hard to find a facility that allow us to pack. Everywhere had a 6 month wait list. Like Commissary Kitchen has 6 month wait list to get in, and we were just, we needed to move fast. So we were pretty scrappy initially. We asked. I found this random posting on Facebook Marketplace. It was like a co-working space,
Okay.
a local co-working space, and I asked them, hey, can I rent your kitchen for like the weekend? And then that's what we did for the first month. We like packed there, and yeah, like just me, my co-founder, a couple of our friends. We pack there, we deliver ourselves, and up until one day in August, I got connected by a friend to this produce wholesaler. His name is Kyle. If you're listening to this, love you, Kyle. He
What's up, Kyle the
completely
wholesaler?
changed.
Shout out.
Yeah, Kyle's my homie, my man. But he completely changed our lives. He has a family business that basically import and export import produce and then wholesale them to like restaurants and whatnot in the area. He also has a packing facility or packing service. So I somehow managed to convince him that our 2 month old company should, move into his facility and he should provide the packing service for us. And I think he was quite amused. He was like, you know what, this could, spice up my daily job. So he took a chance on us. And yeah, so we moved into the facility, I think in early August, and they really help us with, providing the labor to help pack our mystery box, and then we had that like delivery service that helps ship them out. So me and Ariel don't have to be, like packing every weekend anymore. But yeah, it was a character defining summer. I'll say that.
Yeah, I think that's like just grit. Like you got through it with grit, but it's cool that you never know when you're going to find your Kyle.
Yeah,
That
that's true.
key to
The believer.
unlocking, yeah, the believer, the key to unlocking something that otherwise, like maybe it would have been hard, or you would have had to quit along this way if you just had to
Mhm.
keep trying to wait for a commissary kitchen or to rent the
Mhm.
kitchen of a co-founding space. Um,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
so you were buying. Damn, this sounds like a cash flow nightmare. Uh, because you were buying produce and
Mhm.
then you were selling produce, and I guess people would just
Mhm.
subscribe to, hey, and definitely drop me a mystery bag every week,
Mhm.
and you would make sure that you're
Yeah,
buying only enough to fill the mystery bags. Otherwise, you were gonna end up in a spot where you had surplus. Like, how
that's
the hell were
true.
you
That's true.
figuring that out?
We work using a pre-order system, so thankfully that helped us really like minimize our waste. So really, our waste is just some things are just beyond like salvaging. So we just compost them, for example. Um, so how it works is we have a website called pekoproduce.com. So that's Peko produce.com. Customer place an order on there. Based on the number of order we got, we then estimate how much food we need to buy. So for example, every of our box nowadays weighs at least 12 pounds. So we know that, for example, if we sell 10 box, we need to buy at least 120 pounds of produce. And then we need to diversify them so that there's like at least 9 different varieties of food items in there. Um, and it's honestly, it's a mix of science and art. You kind of have a category and formula that you go with, but you also kind of improvise along the way because the thing with surplus and imperfect food is that it comes in very unpredictable quantities, right? It might come in a lot, it might come in very little. So, um, because of that, not every box looked the same. And as we were curating the box, we also learned that, oh, like we should always have these items, but then the more seasonal items we can like swap with like something like, for example, can swap watermelon with coconut, for example, if we run out of watermelon halfway through. So it's that's why it's a kind of an art too. And because of that, that help us with our cash flow because we don't have to like we already have funds coming in
Yeah.
before we have to pay our supplier.
Yeah, they were buying it from you, and then you were going
Mhm.
to buy it from your supplier, which is super cool.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
I assume it was in the arbitrage of that, but where and how did Peko make
Hmm.
make money and still be able to
Yeah.
offer up to 40% less
Hmm.
for your customers, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the savings does vary from week to week depending on the market price of the fruit and veggies. Um, so how we make money is the arbitrage, you're right. So because we buy these B grade or surplus produce, we get a big wholesale discount on them. And because of that, we are able to transfer the savings over to the consumer. The second part is by remaining a mystery box, we are able to save on labor costs and operational costs. So a lot of the cost structure for like food processing companies is that there's a lot of labor involved, like delivery, things like that. And by keeping our box in mystery box, you don't have to customize everything, right? So because of that, you save time packing a box, and then you don't really have to like negotiate way too much to get the price that you want for the supply because you already got a good price and you just have to assemble the box in a way that is of value to customer and meeting our standards like quality control wise. So yeah, so two part to that: the arbitrage of the wholesale discount, as well as remaining a mystery box so that we can rescue as much food as possible while keeping our costs low.
Interesting. And so,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, this story ends slash doesn't end because you're still driving Peko in a new shape or form under Fresh Prep.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
um, so you grew this to what
Mhm.
magnitude did you sort of, how many customers were you servicing, or how big did you grow this
Mhm.
to? And then before this acquisition by Fresh Prep, and then maybe we can talk about that a
Mhm.
little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So when we sold Peko late February of 2023, I think we were at around like 13,000 orders at that point, and we were only in Metro
Wow.
Vancouver. So we were like a year and a half old as a company.
Wow. But 13,000, like that's a number. That's like real.
Thank
A
you.
lot of orders. Good job.
Yeah, well, it didn't start out like that for sure. I think when we first started, our first week went really well, but then we definitely had a big mess up in our first ever delivery. So we um, got a lot of backlash just because we
Was
didn't
it
know how
just
to.
bananas? Like that week with the mystery was like you all get bananas, like Oprah style. Like you get a banana,
Yeah,
you get extra banana.
yeah. From the 16,000 pounds, it was extra. I wish, but no, we just didn't control quality well enough, and then we kind of got burned by only signing with one supplier at that point.
Mm,
And they didn't give us enough supplies essentially. And then a lot of people were mad because, the quality wasn't up to par, which is a big lesson for me too, because it's kind of, it's a new concept. While it's been around for a couple of years, we're not the first, company to do this. I think it's still, you still need to educate consumer on what to expect. And obviously they have their own benchmark, which is personal to everyone. Um, but yeah, so we had when we first started, like the first 3 months was honestly pretty rough. Like our sales were relatively low. We didn't have much marketing spend except from like the grassroots movements that we do. But then we had like a major pick me up moment like later that year in November of 2021, which is a whole other story involving a landslide. Happy to elaborate on it later. But yeah, so we grew a lot over that year and a half, and then the co-founders of Fresh Prep have been in touch with us ever since we first started Peko. Actually, we reached out to them for advice on warehouse because, as you remember, I could not get into a facility, and we were just trying to figure out, oh, like, can we like piggyback off them, or can they at least give us some advice on where to go? And then we just stay in touch here and there throughout the process. And at that point, I think we were saving over 100,000 pounds of food from going to waste, and have saved customer close to $500,000 in terms of grocery savings. So, pretty far along, we basically almost double the number now. Now that we are 9 months in, and yeah, so it's been a journey for sure.
that's insane. Um, I want to talk about maybe some of the next chapter with Fresh Prep, but before we
Mhm,
do, you mentioned something there that
mhm,
I just want to touch on. You said
mhm,
this is not like perfectly unique. There are some competitors here.
mhm,
What do you think
mhm.
Peko was doing that was like more unique or differentiated you versus some of the other people
Yeah,
in this space?
yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned that when Google imperfect food, for example, you'll see these really funky looking produce. So in Canada, there is a grocery chain that sell these bags of like actually like cosmetically imperfect items, but they only have a select few. So, for example, they would have a 10 pounds bag of imperfect potatoes. But then when are you going to finish 10 pounds of potatoes, right? It's just a lot of
Mm,
food and very few variety. So there's maybe like only three or four different SKUs. Um, so compared to them, since we are a mystery box service and we promise that every box would weight at least 12 pounds with nine variety of fruit and veggies, you really get a reasonable amount of food that can make multiple meals and also can feed a family of four for a whole week. When I cook just for myself, like if I really stretch it, I can go to like 3 weeks with my box. But maybe because I don't like eat that much vegetable every single day. But but if you consume a lot, maybe like 2 weeks, week and a half. So it's still a lot of food. But compared to like direct competitors, for example, there are much more established companies in the States. So you might have heard of Misfit Market, for example. They really are kind of the first mover in the space. They're a lot bigger now, and they have completely transformed to a an online marketplace where you can actually pick and choose what to go into your cart. So very much like grocery store. But that kind of move away from the whole concept of rescuing as much um, like surplus and imperfect food as possible, because now you kind of have to go back to that demand planning issue, which, as I mentioned, food waste comes from unpredictable supply and demand mismatch.
Yeah.
To get to the point that they are, obviously, you need a lot of scale. So, um, they have their own set of challenges to deal with. And for us, we are more focused on rescuing as much food waste as possible by taking whatever that is, cosmetically imperfect or surplus that week. And that's why the whole mystery box concept work for producer, because it really helps save them, give them the peace of mind. They can reduce shrink by just, giving us whatever is out there without having to, uh, go back and forth too much. Whereas for consumer, obviously this product is not for everyone. Like, not everyone want to get a mystery box and, not knowing what to do with it. Um, but at least from our customer, I have found that it really helps them save on groceries by giving them a bigger variety. And also it's good for people who don't want to go to the grocery store and like having to think of a list to buy. I know I'm one of them. I think the cognitive load is just like a lot compared to compared to just having something given to me and then figuring out
You'd
what to
rather be
do
like,
with
what the hell do I do with a rutabaga?
that.
Different
But
type of
we have,
cognitive load. Hey Google, what can I
yeah,
do with a rutabaga for dinner?
exactly. You choose your battle, I guess. So it depends. It's not for everyone, but a lot of our customers have told us that it feels like when you receive a Peko bag, it feels like you're opening your Christmas present because you don't know what you're getting, and then you're like, oh, ooh, what can I do with this?
I wanna know
Hmm.
before we talk about fresh prep, I wanna hear, obviously
Yeah.
you must have through this journey had like the low and a high that you
Hmm.
can share.
Hmm.
But before you
Hmm.
do, can you just tell me how you got to the name Peko? Like when you're
Ah.
saying, I'm like, was it like, hey, take a Peko inside? Like, I don't know. Like, was there something to it? Like, how'd you get to Peko?
Oh,
Yeah, I don't know, right? How'd you get to Peko? And then like, tell us about
yeah,
like
for
some
sure.
of the highs and lows here of your, you know,
Hmm.
journey to 13,000 orders, which is crazy.
Yeah. Let's see. Peko. Take a Peko. That's the first I've heard. Kind of random. Peko. Came from the fact that we call our produce like peculiar produce. So Peko
Yeah.
peculiar, like close enough. But it also was kind of random that Peko in Japanese also means that your stomach is like rumbling because you're hungry. Complete like accident, by the
Hmm.
way. Like I didn't know Japanese. I have like no Japanese affiliation whatsoever. But when we thought of the name Peko, I was like looking up what it means, right? And it just so happens it's like food related. So I was like, okay, it sounds unique enough. It sounds catchy and short enough, and it. I think people kind of can maybe link the peculiar and Peko. So that's how we landed on Peko.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. So
Yeah.
highs
So
and
pretty
lows of
random.
Peko. Give us the highs and lows of Peko.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
if you
okay.
tell me your high was
Hmm.
16,000 pounds of bananas, I'm going to question things.
My highs and lows are actually condensed in one story. That's the highest high and lowest low. So in November of 2021, I was like going on a road trip with a couple of friends into interior BC towards Kelowna. And you might or might not remember this, but BC had a huge weather event that year where we had like a significant amount, like way more than usual amount of rainfall following a really dry summer with a lot of heat waves. So what that does, it makes the ground like very unstable. It uproot trees, things like that. And as a result, when I was going on the highway with my friend back to Vancouver, our car got knocked off the highway by a landslide, and we were stuck in this valley filled with water, fallen trees, stranded for 7 hours before search and rescue came and find us. This is like we're still running Peko. I was back in school finishing my
This is traumatic as
my second.
hell.
I know it's very traumatic. That's why it's like my lowest low.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
were
but it was
literally in a
very.
valley.
I was in a valley and there was like a huge river next to me. I hear the mountain rumbling where I was like on top of my crushed car. We lost like there was four of us. We lost all three phones, so we had like one phone left to call 911. Um, and we also lost our jacket when falling down. So it was like November. It was rainy. It was probably like 5 degree Celsius outside. We were like so cold and drenched in mud water, and we're just like hugging each other for 7 hours before we got rescued. Yeah, traumatic for sure. But thankfully we all emerged from that pretty much unscathed, which is minor injuries and whatnot. But yeah, mind you, during this whole time, I was still riding Peko. It was like only like a 2 day trip. And I was also in school. It was also midterm season for me. So after I got rescued, like my laptop was gone, everything was gone. But there's a blessing in disguise, I guess, at least for Peko. So the thing about Canada in general is that it's pretty hard to get like from province to provinces by road. I guess there's only really like one set of highways to lead you from one province to another. And with the fallen with like the rainfall, that brought a lot of landslide, broken bridges, floods that completely block off BC from other provinces by road at least. So this is also like just kind of still kind of during COVID because it's November 2021, and people did panic buy during COVID, right? So when we were cut off from the rest of the provinces, food could not be shipped in or out of BC. That means that because we work with surplus food, we got so much more supply coming in. Um, and people at the same time were also panic buying. So grocery stores were wiped out in certain areas, even though it was like in the city. So, if you live in Metro Vancouver, you're fine because you have the port and you can like still get food basically. The people who get really messed up is people who are landlocked in the interior, that don't have access to food during this whole incident, which is very unfortunate. And a lot of people did lose their lives and also like their homes, their yeah, like animals, farms were
Yeah.
just underwater. So very unfortunate. But anyhow, so we got a lot of surplus food, and I told my co-founder, hey, I can't work this next couple of days. I gotta go to the hospital. And then she made a post on like a couple of Facebook group sharing that hey, we have a lot more supply because of the situation of our company, and it completely went viral. So in that single week, we 10x our sales.
Wow.
And she was
And you're
back
just
in
chilling
school
in
and
a
like, yo,
hospital being like, what's up? Go Ariel.
yeah, go Ariel for real. Yeah, that was very interesting turn of event. So thankfully, because I was like pretty okay, I went to work a couple of days after my accident. And at this point, we didn't really have a lot of staff yet, which was me and Ariel. And Ariel was back in school in Montreal at this point. So it was me, my man Kyle, and like a small group of packers and delivery drivers. And we went from like 60 order a week to like 600 orders a week. So I was like, oh my goodness, I need to figure out how to work with this, right? So I think I spent a whole Saturday and Sunday in the facility, like moving things along, making sure things are shipped properly. And after that week, our sales really picked up, and our business picked up in general as a result of new customer coming in, more brand recognition. And then we were like, okay, I think it's time to hire people. So we after that we hired our first set of interns, and I guess the rest is history.
That's an amazing, like, roller coaster of a story, literally.
Literally.
Um, which is like such a cool way to, close out on the how you popped, and like, you keep going, you don't know when
Mhm.
that moment's going to happen, and there's like all
Mhm.
these events that you could have never predicted that really sets you on
Exactly.
an amazing trajectory. Let's talk then
Mhm.
about, so then you grew a little bit after
Mhm.
that, you get acquired by Fresh Prep. Talk to us about like now what the next, months, year have in store for you as you look forward. And now that you're sort of running this marketing role, while still running
Mhm.
Peko inside of Fresh Prep.
Mhm.
Talk to us about that.
Yeah, for sure. We do have some really exciting development in the work right now. So, as you know, so far we only have one flagship product, which is our mystery bag of um, peculiar and surplus produce. But in the next couple of months, we will be launching a new line of product where you can now shop um, also surplus and close to best before dates, like dry goods, protein, ready to eat items. And this is a result of us partnering with Fresh Prep and having more access to the supplies that are given to us as a result of our synergies. So that is a very interesting way because now we can really help people, you know, buy Peko as a one-stop shop. You might not need to. You can now get dairy, protein, things like that. So yeah, I'm very excited to officially launch that very soon. And I'm hoping that in the next couple of years we will really cover um, every province in Canada. So far, we did serve most of Metro Vancouver and recently expanded to Metro Calgary. We're hoping to expand like across BC and Alberta a bit more before reaching out east towards you. So yeah, that's the long term goal of Peko to really become the number one online marketplace for all things sustainable and affordable.
That's amazing. So, if people have been either intrigued by your story or want their own mystery box or want something from Fresh Prep, where can
Mm-hmm.
people go find out more? And we'll link all this in the description as well. But
Mm-hmm.
where can people go find out more? And maybe can they still sign up for this mystery box? And did you do it through Peko or Fresh Prep? Like, tell us where
Mm-hmm.
to go.
Yeah, for sure. We still remain two separate entities for the most part. So if you want to buy Peko, find us at pekoproduce.com. So Peko produce.com. And you can also find us on all social media with the handle Peko Produce. We are currently servicing Metro Vancouver every Thursday and Saturday, and Calgary every Sunday as of November 2023. And if you are interested in a sustainable meal kit solution, so you can look at freshprep.ca, and they also service most of BC and Alberta.
Amazing. And is there anything, I mean, it sounds like you're on fire, but I always ask, is there anything that if someone's listening, because you never know who, it could be Kyle, it could be one of those 600 people that just ramped up orders, but is there anything, if
Mm-hmm.
there's someone listening that just happens to be the right person, of somewhere where you
Mm-hmm.
or your team or where you're looking to go need help or assistance?
That's a great question. Well, the best way to support us is to buy from pecoproduce.com. And we'd love to see it if you guys do hear this podcast and reach out to us or interact with us on social media as well. We always love to hear from new friends and old friends. And maybe at some point soon, we're not hiring, but we might be hiring soon. So keep an eye out on our website for any posting to join our team. I promise it's a very fun and funky and just, very down to earth team.
I love it. I love it. Any closing words as we sort of wrap up here? Saying you've shared so much
Mhm.
cool insight. I've had a blast. Sorry, my
Thanks,
lights are.
Mike.
I
You as
don't.
well.
Clearly, it's dark here in Toronto because my lights just keep dimming and my face looks like a glowing ghost. So thank you for bearing with that. But
Oh,
yeah,
all good.
any closing like
Mm.
thoughts, advice, feedback
Hmm.
for our audience before we sort of wrap up for tonight?
For sure. I'm assuming that a lot of people who are listening here are interested in startup or perhaps wanting to start a company somehow. I think that my biggest piece of advice, if you were to ever start something, is to just start and like you'll learn along the way. I think a lot of times we get stuck in inaction because we evaluating, analyzing so much. But it's probably better, at least in my experience, to just start small and then experiment, learn throughout. You'll never be completely ready. So, might as well try and see what happens. And yeah, everything is hard. Choose your own heart is what I would close with.
Choose your own heart. What a banger to close out with. Saying I've had a blast tonight. Thank you for sharing your
Me
story
as
with us.
well.
Thank you, everybody who tuned in to another episode of the Pitch Please podcast. Hope you enjoyed this one. Make sure to check out Peko Produce, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you so much for having me.